How's it going, y'all? My name is Poze, and I'm about to show you how I made my new single, Who You Been Around. Let's get right into it. Alright, so first I want to walk you guys through the structure of the song first, and then I'll go into more of the mixing and the mastering stuff. I'm going to go from the beginning to the end. So right off the bat, I just want to tackle the beginning part and the samples that I'm using, right? So for this song, I kind of wanted a soulful R&B vibe going for it, and just trying to flip it to a house thing, right? So I was looking for a sample, and I actually found this really great sample here. I'll play it right now. Excellent sample, excellent sample. So I heard that, I was like, yo, like this is crazy. So I was like thinking all these ideas how I could flip this, and I knew my next step was that I wanted some sort of vocal, a phrase or something to anchor the song, right? So I was looking around, and I found this vocal sample. I'm gonna play on top of the piano right here. And you can kind of tell, but there's a little filter over it. And thankfully, I had the bass that went along with the piano. And I knew I was like, okay, this is perfect, right? So this next part has the bass coming in. And here I had taken the filter off of the vocals, and I put a little impact sound just to give it a little bit more of a, okay, like this is a new part of the song, right? And for the most part, it loops and then it goes through a build-up. So I have a piano here, the vocals, the bass, and then now I have this horn that plays right before the drums kick in, and I'm gonna play that right now. I have a quick drum roll there to lead right in. I layered a crash on top of the initial drum roll hit, and then a crash when the actual beat comes in, just to give it some impact. With everything else, and on top of everything, I added this, I believe it was part of the same sample, it was this organ. So that organ is just layered on top. Now I'm just going to solo the drums real quick. I'm actually going to solo the drums with the bass. But and then when the drums kick in, I ended up layering the vocal phrase here. I'll play that. Kind of sounds a little funny, but I format shifted it up, just add a little bit of an extra layer on top of the vocals already, and I made it so you can hear it more in the left and right. And then now we're going to go into the build-up, right? So the build-up is more or less fairly simple. I had chopped up the vocal sample here, put a bunch of reverb on and some filters and stuff. So here are all the impact effects together that go into the build-up. And now I'm going to play it all together. Now you hear that big filtering, almost almost flanger phaser effect that's going up. So that I was thinking, like, how can I make this build up be a little bit different than like a generic riser? And I do have risers in here, but I wanted to do something a little bit different. And I had added this filtering effect, but I'll get to that soon. One thing I forgot to mention is this shaker that I put right here, and that is layered on top when the drums first come in. So it's just something extra in the background, some extra groove there. And that continues all the way up until the drop. So now for the big thing. When I was initially making this song, I was actually stuck all the way up until the drop. I was like, how, like what should this be? Because I knew I wanted to be a soul type of track, but that would flip into a house thing. But I didn't really know how exactly I wanted to do the drop. And I was looking, I was trying to find ideas. I was listening to different songs, and I was taking a lot of inspiration from artists like Jiggets and Bobski and their style of house music. So I wanted to do something a little bit similar. Shout out to those guys, by the way. They're really good. So I played it pretty simple with the sound design of the drop. Right here, I'm going to show you just the layers that I have over the synths. So I used Omnisphere for all these. So I'm just going to show you what I did here. So this first layer is the sub bass. So I ended up using the Plectrum sub patch in Omnisphere for this. And I really liked how it sounded. It didn't really have too much of a super deep texture to it, which I did want. I didn't want anything super deep for this song. This will be the second layer. Now I'm going to play it one by one. And again, very simple, very simple. So funny enough, the layer here is just the stock Omnisphere sine wave sound. And I was thinking, well, I'm just going to have this have a little bit more of a high-end feel. And yeah, I liked it. So now let's get into the third layer that I have here. Now this one I added to give a little bit more crunch and a little bit more space in the mix. As you could probably hear, it's almost like it's going to the left and right, and you can hear it surrounding you. And it has a little bit of this flanger effect on top of it that I also really liked, again, to give more width to it. The patch I ended up using for this one was called Polluted Lead. And yeah, when I heard it, I was like, yeah, that's pretty dope. Yeah. So for the fourth and final layer for the lead, let's get right into it. Now, this one is super important. And when I was first putting this together, it was meant to be a texture underneath, but towards the end of the mix and towards the end of the production of the song, I was like, I want this to be a bit more prominent. And it's, again, giving space, and it's giving emotion to the lead. It's not just like, it's not just like straight forward. It's just like, it's almost like it's moving. So all together, they all sound like this. I really liked just how it came out, especially with how simple it was. And you can still hear that crunch. It's just, I loved the sound of this. Now, of course, with all that being said, I still had to have the vocal. And I knew when the drop was going to initially hit, I did not want the same vocal to play because I thought that it would be repetitive. So I knew I wanted to change it a little bit. So what I decided to do was that right when the drop first hit, it would be a 4-minute shift down of the vocal, and I'm going to play that right now. I'm actually going to play it with the drop so you guys can hear it. Now, as you can tell, I format shifted it down, and I really liked how that came out. And I compressed it and everything because when I formatted it down, it changed the frequencies a little bit, so I knew I still wanted it to match the volume of the normal one. Another thing that I wanted to do is I didn't want the drums to kick in right away. I almost wanted it to be like, oh, whoa, what is this thing when the drop actually happens, and then you hear the synth, and then this little space that I added here, I'm going to play that right now. Like, that little thing is so important. And I also cut off the synth and bass sounds when that hits too, so there's almost like the silence, a release, and then the drums kick in right away. Alright, now let's get into the percussion of this track. So initially, the drums here were not supposed to be the final drums. They were simply just a placeholder for my own drums that I wanted to add in later on. Now, as I was going through the mix and as I was finishing the song, I got a little lazy, and I ended up really liking the sound of the drums here. The one thing that I didn't like was how, with all this stuff going on, the cymbals in the loop were being a bit drowned out, so I actually added an extra cymbal layer on top of the cymbals that were already there in the loop, and I'm going to actually isolate that. I'm going to isolate it and then show you the difference between both and how much you can actually hear it. So here is the loop without the extra cymbals layered on top. Now, alone, you can hear the cymbals, and it sounds pretty good. But with everything together, they get a little bit drowned out. So I decided to add the extra layer. So I'm going to actually play that on top of it now. So altogether, it does shine more. So I'm actually going to play the drop all together for you so you can hear it. And I'm going to solo it and then put it back, and you'll hear the difference. This is going to be without the cymbals. Now this is with the extra cymbals added. So you can definitely hear that big difference with the cymbals there compared to it not being there. Without the extra cymbals, you can barely even hear it. And that was an issue that I encountered. And I wanted to make sure that because to me the most important thing with house is just the cymbal rhythm, that groove, that cymbal, and I knew I wanted that prevalent in this song. And of course I added a crash on the impact, obviously, all that good stuff. And I added this weird sound effect here just to add a little bit of change in the song. I'll play that. It's kind of a weird sound, but I liked it. So as we get to the second half of the drop section here, I did a few changes. So I'm going to first start off with the lead. So for the lead, I actually ended up changing it a little bit in the second half, and I'm gonna play that right now. So I added some extra notes just to change it up a little bit, because the four long notes can get repetitive, and that's something I started to pick up on in the very early stages of this song. So adding this definitely helped with the re-listenability and it not being as repetitive. And as you can probably hear in the background, there's almost like this airy, spacey pluck that's going on. I'm actually going to touch on that right now. And that's another really important thing that I put in here to add a little bit of change. And I'm going to play that right now. And again, it's sort of the same thing with making it sound different. I didn't want it to be really repetitive the second for the second half, so I added that little pluck, and it does add a nice little texture in the background. So moving on to the vocal aspect of this, I did do something different. So every time he says girl, like who you been around, girl, I actually cut out the girl, like who you been around, who you been around. That's what it says instead, so I'm gonna play that right now. So as you can hear, I left that space there. I actually put a reverb tail at the end of it so it transitions better. On top of that, I also added these little crashes right here, and I really liked how that sounded. It was a nice little thing. Just a little impact thing there. I actually changed the pitch, as you could tell. It's very short, but I think it adds a lot to this part of the song. So towards the end of the drop here, there are some risers that will transition into the bridge. And so let's get into that. So there's some minor things I want to touch on here. Just quick side note, my CPU does not like this song. So if you hear any crackling, that's why. I need to upgrade my computer. So I just want to put that out there. So when the drop is heading towards the bridge, I had these 3 risers here, as well as a couple transitional effects. But there's a couple things that I actually did. Now, earlier I mentioned that when the sample says girl, I cut it out, but there's one part where I didn't. So that's the same part in the beginning where that sound effect plays, and there's that space, and then the beat kicks in. So the same spot where that happens the second time around, I actually did put the girl in there just to bring that familiarity back of the phrase. And then for the cymbals towards the end, I actually decided to change the rhythm up a little bit, and I'll play that right now. I'm actually going to solo it. So it sounds kind of funny alone, but altogether, this is what it sounds like. So that altogether, it gives a sense of a finality and that the rhythm or the song is going to change. And I like that. I didn't want to use the risers to transition into the bridge. I wanted to do something with the percussion, especially since with a drum loop, you can only really do so much. But with the cymbals, it gave me a little bit more flexibility. So for the piano sample in this part, I brought it back and I actually added this filter effect. And I added a tape delay and some reverb, and it gave a really interesting sound. And I'm actually going to solo it for you guys. I just absolutely loved how that sounded, so I decided to keep it. Now on to the pad that I have layered on top of this. Let me touch on that. So the pad here actually follows the same notes from the drop. So what I decided to do is that instead of having it be just that one layer, I decided to take that and put another layer on top, so an octave up. So it's just playing the same notes but in 2 different octaves. So I'm going to show you how that came out. So it gives it that sort of spooky, airy vibe. And that's kind of what I wanted for the bridge section here. And again, that airy pluck that I was talking about that comes in during the second part of the drop also comes back. So as for the percussion here, I am going to show you what I decided to do. Now, I did a very simple arrangement with the percussion. I wanted to keep the pump of the song, which was the kick, playing throughout, as well as the shakers also from the beginning. So I'm actually going to play that all together. pump of the song continues. As I was imagining, well, people are in the club listening to this and they're dancing. They're going to still want to feel that even through the bridge. At least that's how I wanted the song to be like. There's one extra part of this song, which is the most important part that I have not touched on yet. And that is that the lead itself from the drop, I had accidentally exported it to sidechain or something, which I ended up never doing, but I did export it for something for the sidechain, and it was everything. I had consolidated it, everything, and I was like, I'm gonna just put like some filter here. I actually put Fruity Love filter from FL Studio users out there. Y'all know what I'm talking about. But I actually put a filter there, and I really liked how that sounded. So I just kept it. I completely kept it throughout the whole entire bridge, and I thought it was a really nice touch. And the Love filter gave it such a cool sound that I really liked. So I'll actually solo it so you can listen to it a bit here by itself. So yeah, I thought that sounded really cool. So as for the second half of the drop, I actually didn't use the pads anymore and decided to completely cut out the airy pluck. And on top of the kick there, actually, I didn't really talk about it, but there's a snare too, which I'm just going to play that really briefly that you're going to hear that. So I put a snare throughout that bit, but then towards the second half, it almost becomes quiet, and you're going to hear that right now. So all you hear is just the kick and the filter. So there's a couple things that I want to touch on, and when the second half of the drop hits, you only hear the kick and the filtered lead. But as it starts to build up again, this crowd sound effect goes on. And I really wanted something there as the build-up was happening again. I wanted an extra texture there, and for a long time, I didn't really put anything. That was just it. But I knew I wanted something, so I was looking, I was thinking, like, should I put maybe like a vocal phrase, or maybe should I bring back the "Oh, who you been around" thing? But I decided not to. I decided to do something completely different. And I really liked how just the crowd sounded. And I actually automated the volume so it doesn't hit right away. So it almost gives like this passing by sound, like as if a car is passing you by. And I really like that. So I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to solo right now so you guys can see how that sounded. So yeah, I really liked how that sounded. I was also taking a little bit of inspiration from Skrillex's First of the Year. Now in that song you can hear crowds, almost like a stadium, and I really liked just how much that added to the ambiance of that song too. So on top of the crowd sound, there's a single note that I added, and it's almost like just this pluck, and I'm going to play that right now. That single pluck, I love that. Like that is just one note, and it adds a lot to the atmosphere and the layers of this section. As we're heading up into the second drop, I ended up doing something completely different, and I took a sample that had nothing to do with the samples from the beginning, and I just added it in to add a little bit of suspense leading into the second drop. And I'm going to play that for you right now. So that sample is super important as well, and it's in the same key of the song, so it fit, and I loved it. I love how that sounded. We just have a couple risers coming in here, and I added this kick by itself, and I put it up an octave, just again to add a little bit of anticipation. So I'm going to play that. If you know me, you know I like to. I love my kicks. Anywhere I can add a kick, I will add it, especially if it's transitioning to another part of the song. But yeah, so that's the bridge, and I absolutely loved how that section came out. Now, leading back into the second drop, it is more or less the same thing. I had looped the drop twice over, and the only thing that's really different here is that towards the end, I actually took out the vocals. Took out the vocals so the listener can just focus on the synths and the rhythm there. And yeah, so I'm just gonna play that part. Alright, so that's basically the overall structure of the song and what I did. Now, as you could tell at the end, I brought back the loop, and I pretty much copied and pasted what I did in the beginning all the way up until the drum roll. So I'm actually gonna play that. And I knew I wanted to end the song like that, just to bring back the familiarity from the piano, because it doesn't really come back. So yeah, so that is the overall structure of the song. Alright, now we're going to get into the most fun part of making music. That's the mixing and mastering. Alright? So if y'all ready, buckle up, because it's going to be a lot. Oh, it's cold. It's cold. I'm sure y'all can see the temperature on the bottom right there. It's chilly. Okay, now my jacket on, we are all ready to go. So let's get right into it. So the first part that I wanted to touch on is just the EQing that I did. So basically for the piano, I kept the low end for the most part of the piano, but I did, and I'm just going to activate it here because the reason why it's deactivated is because it'll mess up my CPU, but I cut off a lot of the highs here, as you could tell. There's a lot of frequencies that were really, really cutting to the mix that were a bit ear piercing. And typically when I mix, a lot of it is just surgical EQ. And it's downward surgical EQ, so I'm just taking away frequencies. So I have two EQs here. I got this one taking off the low, and then I have this one just taking off the low even more. So this second EQ right here comes in when the bass comes in. So when the bass comes in, you don't hear the low end of the piano and there's no clashing. Since the drums have a kick and since kick is in the low end, I decided to make a sidechain so the kick will cause the bass to duck. So since I had a loop, it's a little bit more of a process. So what I do is that I put it in a separate, I send it, right? And when I send it to a separate track, this is going to be the sidechain track, meaning that it is taking the signal, right, of the drums or the kick or whatever. It's taking the signal, and then you take that sidechain track and send it to whatever you want to actually be sidechained. So since this is a drum loop, I isolated the low end, just the kick, and then I sent it to the bass, and then the bass is being sidechained, and you guys can actually see it working right here. So right there is ducking. It's ducking, leaving space for the kick, so it's not clashing. It gives a cleaner sound. Now going right into the drop. There's not many layers, so there's not much going on, but I did cut out pretty much all the lows for this synth. So this is the bass, I believe. Yeah, this is the bass. Now I know y'all thinking, yo, why would you raise the mid-range here? Well, I did that because I wanted some texture for the bass, and thankfully it wasn't too overbearing. Where I was like, yo, this sounds pretty rough or muddy. So, but thankfully this did not impact the bass much. So I put a dip right here at the end to cut out any low muddy frequencies that the human ear can't even really hear. So they're unnecessary, so I got rid of it. Obviously, I put a sidechain, right? You know, a sidechain for the drums. Now, I didn't do this type of sidechain for the drums in the beginning because it was a separate rhythm. Now, Nicky Romero sidechain, it's really only good for like if you're doing if it's just like a pattern, like boom, 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 right? If it's like different types of patterns, it's good to do your own. So I already talked a lot about the Fruity Love filter here and the other things. A lot of it is just surgical EQ. A lot of it is surgical EQ. A lot of Pro Q3s. A lot of compressing down. I like to do that. Making room for the bass, right? Just all that good stuff. Now for the final part of this song, I am going to touch on the master. So I start off with the EQ, Pro Q3, which is activated because to save my CPU, but I'm going to activate that now. An OTT, a bus compressor, ozone, Uling loudness, and span. Now I cannot clarify this enough. Out of all the plugins that's on my master, span and Uling loudness are the two most important, okay? And they're both free, all right? If y'all, whoever's watching this, if y'all first starting out, or even if y'all been doing this for a long time, get Span. All right, Span is such a good tool to have, and I want to show you guys what it is. Now you're probably looking at this like, yo, what the heck is this? So this is gonna look like an EQ. So I'm gonna play something. Right here, you're seeing the frequencies play live. Right. Now this is super important when you're making music because you can see where certain frequencies are too loud, too quiet. You can see where your bass is sitting in the low end, and I heavily recommend this plugin to anybody. So right here is the second most important, in my opinion, is Uling loudness meter. Now this is a very common plugin, and Span is too. But for anyone who's watching this and they don't have these two things, you need to go and get these two things right away. Now, all Uling loudness meter does is just tell you how loud your song is. This is good for trying to match the same volume as other songs you like. So, like for example, if you're trying to use a reference track and mirror that to your mix, you can say, okay, well, they're around -5 LUFS. And basically, that -5 LUFS is just telling you how loud the song is. So that means that you want to try and find that. And now you don't have to. All mixes are different, but it is good. So, for example, my mix right now, it says -12.5 LUFS, but it's actually -4.6 at the loudest. Now, you want to look at the short-term max. Okay, that's what I always look at as a short-term max, which, as you can tell towards the bottom, it says true peak max, right? It says -0.1 decibels. Right above that is where you really want to keep your eyes at. Now, for EDM, it ranges, because EDM is typically louder than typical music that you hear on the radio, country music, R&B, even some rap music. So what I found is that it really depends on the genre. Right now, if you're making dubstep, right, I've heard a lot of that mixed around between -4 LUFS or -5 LUFS. Now for me, I master all my songs, especially songs that are put together on an album or EP, at -4.6. Now that's very specific, and I don't really have any specific reason why, but that's just where I always master my songs. It's a nice range, and it's loud enough, and it matches a lot of other songs. And yes, it is loud. Don't get me wrong, it is loud. But if you're able to pull off a loud mix, you're doing good. Alright, so now we're moving on to my ozone chain. Now, not really much is going on in my ozone, but I put an imager right here, and I always set it to modern width, and I pretty much do that with all my songs. It gives a sense of texture and layer to the mix. Now, other than that, I put a maximizer on here. I put it at IRC4, true peak, and I always put the ceiling to negative 0.1 decibels. And since the mix was loud in itself, I only put the threshold to negative 1 decibels. The character is 165 and my transient is 35%. So not much going on here, but ozone is very important to my mix. Now going up again, I have a bus compressor. Now this is actually a free bus compressor, and I heavily recommend for people to get this one, support the creator. I definitely did a lot of people a good favor here. This is an imitation of the Waves bus compressor, which in itself is very expensive. But so my settings here are always a 4:1 ratio. Put the tack all the way up, leave the release low, and mess around the threshold all the way up until it's compressing around negative 2 decibels. So you have 0, 4, 8, 12. You kind of want it in the center here. You always want it in the center, and that just helps make everything sound like it's meant to be together, and nothing is going too loud. So yeah, that's that. And of course the classic and the quite controversial OTT. Now I love OTT on my master. It brings out some brightness, it makes quiet things sound more prominent, and it adds a lot to my mix. I'm going to show you guys in a little bit how it sounds off and then on. It's going to be a big difference. But for OTT, my settings here are not too crazy. I leave the settings more or less the same. So for the depth, I used to put it at 15%, but recently for my recent mixes, I've been putting it at 8%. The higher you put the depth up, the more the high end is going to stick out. You don't really want that. It's going to sound like it's in some sort of filter, and you don't want that. The upwards compression is at 50%, and the out gain I put it at 5.5 dB. Now it's funny because many years ago when I first started making music, I actually found a guy who found out that deadmau5 used OTT on his master, and these were his settings, or pretty close to it. So I'm thinking, well, if deadmau5 is using OTT, then I can use OTT. Now I could be wrong about that. Who knows? Maybe deadmau5 will comment on this video and say, "Yo, dude, you're stupid." If he does, correct me. But that was rumor, and I've had no issues really with OTT on my master. I've been using OTT for many years now. So I have a Pro Q3. Now the Pro Q3 on the master, all it's doing is just compressing certain frequencies that are sticking out. Now you have to be very careful when putting Pro Q3 on the master, because when you're putting on the master, it's compressing everything. So you could really put some holes through the mix if you're not careful. But here, I was pretty careful, and it only happens at certain parts, specifically around the 2K range. And the final thing that I had on here is my free to parametric EQ, just taken off the super lows around 23 hertz. That's a frequency your ear can't really hear, so there's no point even having it there at all. So I'm actually going to show you guys, before I end this video, how it sounds without these things on the master, and I'm going to show you how it sounds all together. Now I'm going to leave ozone on because that's the limiter. I don't want to take the limiter off. I don't want to blow my headphones, so I'm going to show you guys that. So that is without it, and I still think it sounds pretty decent, but this is with everything on it. So yeah, that's with everything on it, and I think the difference is pretty apparent. As you see, I don't have Pro Q3 on it because it will destroy my CPU. Now with this song, since there really isn't a lot going on, the difference is as drastic, but I have other songs with a similar master chain where the difference is like night and day. But yeah, y'all, so this is my song, Who You've Been Around. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm hoping to do more of these type of videos in the future for my other releases, and I think it's gonna be really cool. If you guys enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe, leave a like, maybe comment something that I should do in the future. If you guys have any questions about mixing and mastering, feel free to let me know, and I will make sure to read all the comments and answer all the questions you guys have. You can actually listen to the song with the link tree in the description and in my YouTube channel bio. And it's out everywhere, Apple Music, Spotify, etc., etc. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.